edge of the night rock, with only 3 people, Hawn, Masnoa, and Noda, standing and staring at each other, each a breath away from potentially launching into an attack on the others. Mazzy was bathed in the power she was barely holding within, preparing to call on her might as a master of the fist, staring at Nada with a cold, featureless glare. Nada, for his part, stood ready to defend himself, but was oddly looking more bemused than tense. Hawn, whose hands were resting on his rotator pistols, seemed to be evaluating the other 2, switching his gaze from one to the other as he considered the facts of what had instigated this standoff. It was what Mazzy had said just as they had entered the bridge, that she was made aware of an imposter on the ship. Normally, this would have resulted in investigation and clarification, but it was the source of the intel that had brought this to this confrontational point. Hawn considered his words carefully, while biting back a frustration that was slowly building, threatening to escalate things beyond reason. Hawn took a slow breath before speaking, and then began, hands moving away from his weapons as he gestured at the other 2. Stand down. Now. Both seemed shocked at the order, but instinct to follow the chain of command took root, and they both relaxed, if only slightly. Hawn continued. We have an issue here, Mazzy, and not the one you brought to my attention. Mazzy's laser focus wavered as her eyes darted to Hawn, confused. Noda's own face was filled with a shade of confusion as well, just as Hawn expected. Mazzy, I was aware of an imposter from the day we began this endeavor. Mazzy's confusion turned to anger, then back to confusion. But she allowed Hawn to continue. Her faith in the Sarge was absolute. Nada was unchanged as Hawn continued. Here is the issue. It's not the imposter. That is already prepared for. Hawn's smile became hollow for a flash, before he continued. No, the problem is, Mazzy. Hawn looked at his chief of security, his longtime ally and close friend, with a sad expression as he spoke. It is the fact that you tell me the trickster worm is the one who told you of this. And that is precisely who informed me of such an issue. Mazzy's rage and aggression drained away as the implication of Hawn's words reached her. The trickster was well known to the members of the House Advanced Division, the Dragon of Time, Trades, who was often known to maneuver events from behind the scenes. However, the worm never presented himself directly from more than one direction or angle, and Mazzy knew it. By appearing to Mazzy, the worm had just done that, and that isn't how he worked at all. On the practical side of things, Hawn continued, now looking fully at Nada, I was aware of your deception from the moment we met. Nada was unmoving, as if made of the stone of his dwarven lineage, and only nodded for Hawn to continue. To be fair, that is not quite accurate. I knew from the moment you introduced yourself. Now Nada smiled in a thin line, and once more nodded. Sir Roitoy, Hawn said, speaking slowly. Nada Roite. Nada's smile lifted at the corners of his mouth as Hawn continued. And if you are not a rider, you are. Mazzy tried to finish for Hawn, but the name stuck in her throat, as it chuckled too deep to come from even a set of dwarven lungs sprung forth from the growing and shifting form of Nada as it grew nearly 10 feet in height, with large wings and a decidedly artificial left arm. Lefty, agent of destiny and trainer of heroes and gods. Hawn finishes Lefty returning to his true form. Lefty, for his part, merely commenting on how surprising it was, the effectiveness that this disguise had had over the ages, and inclined his head towards Mazi, who was no longer preparing to attack, but was in awe of the living legend standing before her. Hawn simply continued by saying that this conversation would continue in his office, and that Mazi would inform the crew and make sure operations continued as planned. A few minutes later, Hawn sat behind his desk, holding a drink and looking at Lefty, who was holding his own glass and staring back, Lefty being the epitome of calm, waiting for Hawn to ask the question. Alright, so who are we fighting? Now we started this and you are not a fool. So tell me. The threat went unspoken, but hung in the air as tension from the bridge returned. A deep chuckle of Lefty's dispelled it, as he asked Hawn if he was sure he wanted the truth of such things, as the reason for his concealment was not merely for the fun of shadow play. Lefty told him it was one of the best held secrets in the realms, the existence of this being, and for good reason. As Hawn sipped at his drink, he considered this. He'd been hiding secrets and dealing with matters in the shadows for the bulk of his life, and understood full well that Lefty was not being trite with his warning. Another sip as he debated the choice, but eventually nodded for Lefty to begin, sealing his office under the highest forms of security he had available. Lefty began. He is known as the Marionette, and he is from an impossible origin. By the 9 and 4, welcome to the library, where today we will look a bit into a major antagonist in both the current situation the realms find itself in, as well as a bit into his origins and history. A foe the gods have bested, sealed, and contained, but never slain. In this entry of Intro to the Realms, we discuss the Marionette. Perceptive patrons, regular visitors, and new guests of the library, I am the recorder. And before we continue on the topic of today's entry, allow me to ask you to like, share, and ensure you're subscribed to Gryphon's Library so you can always have ready access to entries as they release. If you wish to further support the realms and the library, join us at Gryphon'sLibrary.locals.com for early access to entries days before their regular release, as well as content you will find nowhere else, such as full episodes of all future podcasts of the realm, as only the beginning of each will be available outside of locals. Full podcast episodes will be available to all free members and paying supporters at Gryphon'sLibrary.locals.com, while entry previews and other in-the-works material will be exclusively available to supporters. Other means of support are detailed in the channel's description page. Thank you for your consideration and support of the realms, no matter what form it takes. Now, on to the entry. The being known as the Marionette is a foe unlike many, if not all, the rest the realms has faced. Powerful, unpredictable, and possessed of a hatred for the realms and its mortal gods in particular, that drive him to plans and plots to unseat, if not destroy, the court of the divine and bring the might of his master to rule. But who is he? Where does he come from? And who is his master? For these answers, we must consider the fact, as discussed in a previous entry, the events of the impossible, paradoxical timelines, as well as those involved, are contained within the temporal items that are formed to contain them. Sealed away from the rest of time and reality to prevent the paradox from bringing harm to the flow of time, such events are more or less completely divided from that of baseline reality and time. So, let us explore thought, a possibility that is contained in such a gem of temporsis. What if the Valors, those heroes made gods, failed? What if they were unable to stop the daemon from returning? What if the daemon then chose to, after defeating the rest of Jam'mar's heroes, to obtain and absorb the 9 and 4, the symbols and might of the 9 Wings himself, in so doing displacing the creator of all in the process? A terrifying aspect for those that have any real knowledge of the daemon Vanson. But what next occurred is what is of import to our examination for this entry. What if the Valors didn't die in their attempt to stop Vanson? What if the daemon captured them, and in the process with dealing with the mortals who thought they could stop the daemon, crafted for himself an avatar? From the broken body and mind of the less than 20-year-old Damascus Skychild, who never found the gem of temporsis he is so famed for in our understanding of time. This child who would be tortured and shattered and driven mad, only until service to his new master was all he knew. Made like a puppet on strings, he was given what he had sought originally, as over a dozen shards of temporsis were driven deep into his flesh, granting the soon-to-be Marionette the powers of time travel and manipulation he had sought to fight his now master. Unable to refuse or deny the will or power of his demonic master, the Marionette was born in the death cries of the other Valors as he slew them all. His father, his mother, and even his little brother at Vanson's whim. This act is what truly killed the hero and the man we know as the god of time, space, and psionics. And ever since, he has been a shell, a madman, only directed by the whims of his new lord. Appearing most often as if a puppet, with limbs moving as if on invisible strings, he retains the youthful appearance he had when he was reforged. This is rather disturbing to most of the gods that have encountered him, especially those that knew Damascus during his youth. His might is thought to be equal to that of the claw, voice, and hand of the 9 Wings, even so disconnected from what should be the sealed pocket of his extra paradoxical origins. His escape from that sealed and locked pocket of time, the gem of temporsis holding it, is in fact wielded by the true Damascus, came about in the events that form that very gem. Events that, on the current map of time, only occurred a few centuries before the Scriptorum conflict, despite the fact Damascus had been the god of time, as well as possessing this gem for millennia before that. Time is confusing, but for the purposes of this entry, I will merely say that in the moments and years that went into the event that created the gem, a group of Hands of Destiny were exposed to the events of that paradoxical timeline, and in their efforts to return things to how they should be, the door between what was and what is remained open long enough for the Marionette to escape into the core timeline, and due to his might as the avatar of an elder god, was able to retain himself after. he was quickly countered and defeated by the gods, who chose to seal him away in secret within Damascus's own private prison, and in a manner such that not even the god of time would be aware of. This was done in the fear that this broken version of him might be able to infect and corrupt the Damascus of our time. A fear that centuries later, when it was discovered that the Scriptorum had somehow released him from that prison, was made utterly null and void, as Damascus revealed he was well aware of the Marionette and where he came from. How could the god of time not know what was in the very gem that had served as his main tool for thousands, if not millions, of years? However, with his release at the hand of the Scriptorum, the Marionette vanished in the chaos of the war that was ongoing, and has ever been a silent threat to the gods to look out for. None know his aims or plans, although recent events have made it clear that the Marionette is still insane, and possibly behind the ancient empire's more recent buildup and pushing for rule of inter-realm conflict. However, nothing is ever so simple or clear when any servant of the daemon is involved, so the gods move with care, as to not find themselves ensnared by the tricks and traps of a madman with the power of an elder god and the mind of one of the greatest heroes of the realm. This is where I will bring this introduction of the Marionette to a close. Hopefully you have a better understanding of what, and more specifically who, this foe to the gods and the realms is, why he is considered so dangerous, and why the gods are so concerned about his machinations. Only time will reveal what his current intentions are, and what tricks he has concocted to achieve them. Of course, should you have any questions, you can of course leave a comment, or to ensure that I see and am best able to respond, by becoming a supporter of the Realms of Jam'mar and of Gryphon's Library by joining at Gryphon'sLibrary.locals.com, where you will receive access to a growing library of content and watch entries days before their general release. Receptive patrons, regular visitors, and of course, new guests of the library, I thank you for your time, your interest, and of course, your support of the library and the realms. It means the world to me. Thank you. Until you next make your way back to the library for your next entry of Intro to the Realms, I am, as always, been the Recorder, and by the 9 and 4, be well, take care of yourselves and each other. If you'd like to contribute to the further exploration and explanation of the realms, please consider leaving a comment, a like, and sharing the video around. I read all the comments and make efforts to reply to each. Thank you for helping to grow the channel, and know I look forward to each and every one of your comments. Other methods of support can be found in the channel's description. Thank you for watching,